Hello and welcome to Grody UnPrOfesSiOnAL. My name is Justin McMenamy, and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons I have acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. In this episode, I get the honor of interviewing one of the men that has most inspired and imprinted the leader I am today. Jim Weber, thank you so much for coming and joining me in the Grody UnPrOfesSiOnAL studio. It is an absolute pleasure to catch up. You and I haven't talked to each other in probably 15 years. It's so awesome to get to spend time together.
I agree. I'm glad to see you, and I want to get your autograph when this is over. You can sign my cast. Well, wait a minute. I have to break my arm before it.
We can take care of that.
Can we take that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anyway, I've listened to all of your podcasts, and it's so rewarding to see the transformation that I've observed. And I'm sorry for some of the pain that you actually took care of. I'm glad that you're okay. Not only that you're beyond well, and that you've carried forward with such a great attitude. And I'm going to switch real quickly and say, I'm also really impressed with your abilities with the podcast, because at some point in time, we all get overflowed with, we need to tell people something. We need to tell people what happened. Whether you listen, whether you believe it, you need to hear some of this, because along the way, it might do you some good that avoid some of those sharks that are out there in that water.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've definitely over the years tried to, as I talk about, move it to a lemonade lesson rather than just sharing the stories in their worst possible light. I appreciate that. I know you're a guy that doesn't love compliments to just be poured on, but you are one of the people in my career that I am so significantly indebted to for your humility, for your personality, for your approach to leadership. I can honestly say in those early years of my career, I looked to a lot of the ways you did things and really have tried to emulate them over my own career. And so we'll get that out of the way at the front end.
By the way, I think you've bested me in many areas. And part of that is you avoided some things and you ran into a few other ones that are shocking to me, shall we say.
That's right.
And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, go back and look at a couple of his previous ones. They are head shaking.
So the very first question that I want to ask, and it's the most important question, your last name, Weber, the age-old question is to be or not to be?
I have used that so many times that when I walk up to somebody and then they'll say, how do you spell that? I'll go, to be's or not to be's? That is the question. And it has not failed to elicit a laugh.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is one B.
It is one B. Now, do you interact with two B's, Webers? Or did the family tree split and we don't talk to the two B's anymore? How do the one B's and the two B's interact?
Do you know something I don't?
No, not yet.
I'm just curious. Because if there's some two B's out there that I don't know about and are connected to me, I want to know that right now.
That's right. For those that have never met you, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jim.
I was raised on a farm out in eastern McLean County. My dad was not the typical farmer. He was more of an inventor. And he made things. And I watched this. And it infected me to watch this guy who didn't have what I would call a formal education in engineering be able to do things and make things. I remember asking him, how do you know to wire a three-phase motor? And he said, when the sparks stop. And I realized that there were many ways to figuring out things. He wanted me to go to college because I think he didn't get that opportunity.
Sure.
But it was like, you can become a better form of me. I carried that, quote unquote, do it yourself, never say die. We can get ourselves out of Dodge here, because when you're on the farm, you can't call somebody when the axle breaks out in the back 40 and the rain is coming. You get really clever.
Yeah. So
I went off to the U of I and spent the first 2 years in electrical engineering, and then realized I wanted more than just electronics. I did like electronics, but I also liked physics, and I spent the rest of my career as something called theoretical and applied mechanics, and I learned all of the different basic fundamentals of all the engineering and all the physics that goes on, from hydraulics to dynamics to stress and strain, even quantum mechanics.
Okay.
And from there, I matriculated to my first and only job at a large company, and that was my next step in life.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. You and I interacted at Caterpillar. We worked together for about a decade. And one of the things I saw was your passion for mentoring people, for pouring into people, for developing people. Often you would ask someone at the beginning of a mentoring relationship to have them write down and make a list of the 5 or 6 people that they admire, along with why it is they admire. And you talk about how that gives you a window into who they aspire to become. And so I'm interested, who are those people either that you know or you've read about or you've seen their work that you admire?
They're really quite different. I mentioned one that my father, who worked so hard at the what ifs in life, you have to include him on the list. Another one would, I think people would go, My dormitory, the U of I, was Illinois Street Residence Hall, means nothing to anybody, but it was across from the physics building. And the physics department had a guy named John Bardeen, who was twice Nobel Prize winner in physics. The first one came when he was at Bell Labs, and he invented the transistor. And the second one was superconductivity development. If you actually knew the guy, and I can't say that I knew him,
sure,
but he was not very articulate, and he had a kind of a stammer. But people from all over the world came to work with that. And I said to myself, that's because he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
I want to know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the joke goes, I would have lunch with John Bardeen. He would come across the street at the snack shop down in the basement, and I was maybe 3 or 4 tables over, and I used to watch him. It was really interesting to say, here's a guy that's not really glamorous,
yeah,
but he's working at the edge of the world of what knowledge really is. And I said, I want to be like that. I want to know everything that I can possibly know, which, as we know, you're never going to get there. The other people that I totally admire is Nelson Jones, who was one of my bosses, that he never said anything bad about anybody, which is really an impressive saying. Yeah. And I want to be like that. There was Larry Cook, another one of the great bosses that I had, who had so much faith in me. He had more faith in me than I did in myself.
Yeah.
That was quite a remarkable view. So there's 4 anyway, or 5.
That's excellent. Near the end of your career, you wrote a book.
I did.
You called that book The Offcenter of Excellence.
Well, I actually called it the Employee Handbook. It's at the Offcenter of Excellence. The Offcenter of Excellence, by the way, came as a little tongue-in-cheek. The place that I worked, everybody was creating these things called Centers of Excellence.
Yes.
It was like they ran to it. It's like, oh, yeah, well, we have a test center of excellence. And when I was like that. And I sat there and I went, I'm not like that at all. But I do like the thought, I'm the off center of excellence. And so I claimed that particular URL, even though things that I liked were very, very technical. Along the way, I found there was a remarkable talent pool. And this remarkable talent pool was being untapped. And as they worked with me to help some of the great things that we did together, I realized that these are the people I wanted to run a company.
Yeah.
These guys are really sharp, but they were very quiet. They're that typical Midwestern farm boy or farm girl that was very respectful and wanted to be helpful. But so many of them, not all of them, had remarkable innovation and ideas, and they were not being illuminated. And so it was my quest to find them.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I went and found these.
Found them out.
Yeah.
I worked at the same time, same company, same place where everybody's calling themselves the Center of Excellence. I always felt that calling yourself the Center of Excellence is kind of like a nickname. Like you really can't give yourself a nickname. I felt like if somebody else called you the Center of Excellence, that's fine. But when you just walk onto the basketball court and you're like, my name's the Hammer.
So I think you understood why I called us the Off Center of Excellence, because I too probably had a tongue in cheek and looked at that and said, really? You think you're that good?
That's right.
Hey, how about this guy over here? I'm the Off Center of Excellence.
That's right. In the book, you talk a lot about inspiration, and specifically taking inspiration and making it a personal focus, that you would go into work on a regular basis and make it part of your daily habit, your daily routine, to attempt to inspire for sure, in my experience with you, I saw that firsthand. I saw that you focus not just on getting the task done, but doing it in a way that had a degree of fun, had a degree of enjoyment, and had a degree of sharing the credit with other people. As you think about inspiring others, what are some of the tools that you used?
That's a really good question, because I don't think that I know all of them, because this is not in any way meant to be a self-adulation, but there are a lot of people that said what you just said.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure what kind of magic sauce is out there. At that point in time, everybody goes like, huh? Well, let's start with a selfish.
Sure.
The selfish was, you look around in a large organization and you find that so many places it was so fraternal that there wasn't anything going forward that was going to improve the lot of life of the world. And you said about fun, I really was driven by, I want to have more fun. I want to have fun when I do it. The idea that you have fun somewhere else and you work here, this seems silly. It seems like you ought to be one person. You ought to be able to enjoy the entire stream of thing. And because I was so focused on the technical details, and then woke up early in a career and realized how smart the other people were, that to get them infected with, look what we could do if we did this way. And it doesn't really attack I'll use that word, organization. It doesn't really attack them. It displaces them. It makes it moot that this thing even goes forward that way. And it's so obvious to everybody. And the people that you claim that they got inspired saw their benefit. They saw their impact. They saw their input. Yes. They saw how they did this. I wasn't necessarily salting their ideas and saying, here, hey, what about this? It was, here's what I think. And somehow leaving enough door open that they had an opinion.
Yeah.
And that opinion was not only just well accepted, it was like, that's actually pretty good. Wonder what we could do with that. And pretty soon they realized that this was truly was a team, not to necessarily be focused on the company, but be focused on the absolute. I actually include that in my book, and nobody would understand that. But I want to wake up in the morning and says, I want to be competing with the guys from Silicon Valley. I want to be competing with these people out there that says my thing would be accepted anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And once you take that view, you're really moving your whole effort up to a world-class, I hate that word, by the way, world-class, whatever that means. World-class, it really moves it up.
It sits right next to the center of excellence.
Yeah, right next to the center, off-center of excellence, right next to it. It really does motivate people because they realize that, wow, I'm working on things that essentially nobody else is working on.
Yeah.
Doing things that nobody else has ever done. And I'm just a common, ordinary guy that's sitting down in here, and suddenly it goes like, wow, this is fun.
Yeah.
When I say fun, I think, laughter and stuff. I do include that, by the way.
That's right.
But the idea that says, this is really cool. I get up in the morning and I'm inspired to be able to go and do these things. There are countless examples of this where I would get people so excited about what they would do. I remember one guy coming in and his hair was he had real long curly hair and piled up on top of his head. It was all flat on one side. He said, I've been up all night. I didn't intend to have him up all, that wasn't in it, but he was so excited about what he was. This guy had never done anything like this before. And he was excited. He's done very well, by the way.
Yeah.
It's gone on.
I think you touch on a number of them. One, you invited people to be part of something bigger, whether it was a new technology that nobody else on the earth had ever figured out, or whether it was a problem in the marketplace that if we solve this problem, we're going to take the market by storm, all the way down to interns, all the way to brand new engineers, to guys that were on the assembly line. You gave them enough of the story to invite them into something bigger, and you gave them lines in the play. You shared the spotlight with them. It wasn't, hey, I'm doing this thing and I need you to do A, B, and C so that I can be successful. It was, there's this thing happening. There's this project happening and it's very important. We're breaking ground. I've got a role for you with lines, with the spotlight that you can be a part of. And that was done from my perspective, from my observation, that was done without pretense. It wasn't done in a do it or else. You were inviting people into that conversation. And I think a lot of people, they want to feel needed. They want to feel valued. If you allow them to use their giftedness in that way, that's inspiring. That drives you to say, man, I don't want to sleep. I'm part of something that I want to get this done.
All those things are really quite inspiring to me right now to listen to that. It seems to me it's natural. It's not something that it's somehow getting credited for it. The real element in this is that there are some people that have skills, lots of skills that nobody knows about. Not even they know them.
Yeah.
If you tap that, if you find out how they hit that, they become so excited. One of the things that you find that these people that I talk about, if you've suddenly shoved them to the front, they're not comfortable. What you have to do is create the avenue by which they can figure out what part they want to play. And if you do it right, they will take center stage eventually in something that they have done in life. And your finger crossed, you hope that they do the same thing for the rest of the people. The people that are sitting up.
So there's one aspect that I remember of us working together, and I really, really hope that you were intentional about this, because I've never asked you this question before. And if it turns out that you weren't intentional about this, I've built a lot of my career on this, and it's all going to crumble.
Oh, sure. It was whatever it is I was totally intentional. Absolutely. And you need to sleep tonight and not worry about it.
Right. So
next question.
Next question. So here we go. You never took an office. You always sat in a cube, and many of the cubes that I saw you sit in over the years, you were actually sitting amongst some of the younger engineers in an organization. Was there intentionality? Please say yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, great.
There was some intentional in this. That's not quite the way it was. Apparently, there's something called an org chart. They eventually impose these things on you, and you're going to get one whether you want it or not.
Right.
Toward the latter part of my career, they gave me one, and it was a pretty good size one. They said, hey, this is your thing. But since it had a big table in it, I turned it over so that everybody could use it as a conference room.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to worry about all that stuff. Whew. Next thing you know, you got to clean this stuff.
Right.
Oh, my Lord. Whew. It's not good.
That's right. I have modeled my career after that in many ways. As I've moved through my career to date, I didn't take an office, and it was to be approachable, to be part of the team. I've always felt that within an organization, there are spoken and unspoken hierarchy that can happen.
Definitely, by the way.
And unspoken hierarchy can be as simple as having an office where you feel like you're disrupting someone as you come in. I don't know what you do in the office, but I've got to come in and into your space. I remember it very distinctly, you not having an office, and it's something that I've emulated. I actually remember, I think it was the last year of your career, they needed cube space. And so there was a retiring manager, and you got relocated into one of the retiring manager's office. And I remember you saying like 40 people would stop by. Jim, did you get promoted? You just got this brand new big office. What do you do? Did you get promoted?
That is totally true. It was absolutely a shock. It was like, whoa, what happened? I looked at him and nothing. And it was true. And they just stood there and looked at you going like, nobody gets an office this big. Something happened. Not for quite a while.
You were in the high rent district.
Yeah, I got in the high rent district. Exactly right. And these people are like, I didn't know something happened. I didn't either. That is 100% true.
One of the phrases that you use in your book, and I've heard you say this before, is paradoxes can't be solved.
Yeah.
So you have to turn a paradox into a problem and then solve the problem.
Yep.
Can you flesh that out? What does that mean?
So if you say, I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't in this particular thing, I'm going to characterize this a little bit differently. I learned to attack a problem a little bit differently when you realize, I'm going to use that word again, there are organizational constraints. Instead of saying, what am I going to do? They won't let me do this, or these people are going to say no. You go, I have to turn this into a problem. As I have described it, it's impossible, because if I come up with this kind of solution, Bob's not going to like it, or Dale, or whoever it is over here. They've got some sort of a barrier up. Most people say, well, to solve a problem, I have to design something, create something, invent something. That's only part of it. Part of it is the people. People could be the people that aren't the bosses. I have had a lot of trouble with engineers who basically, we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a lot of that.
So what would be an example where you have an idea and an engineer basically presents it as a paradox?
When somebody said, burnt the bridges or I burnt the platform, we're going to have to do something else. The engineer often would say, I don't know how to do something else.
Mm.
And you would look at it and say, okay, you're not going to be able to do that. What can we do? And the person would basically stomp their foot, and that was it. So you had to figure a way that would allow that person to see his benefit, to see their participation. I have to invent something that they can do. It happens every day. It happens every day, not only in large organizations, it happens every day in schools and churches and everything. There is somebody that has a different view of how this is going to be. And all problems are the sum total of those pieces in equal balance.
Okay.
I had 8 or 9 technical solutions to a problem.
Yeah.
But I only had one of them that guy over there could actually do.
Right.
And I look over there and I go, wow, that sure causes that guy a problem. What can we do to mitigate that?
Right.
If I write an equation, the technical is a constraint, don't know how to do that one. The engineers are a constraint, don't know how to do that one. The manager is a constraint. What am I going to do there? I don't know how to do that one. But believe me, at that point in time, it's a paradox.
Yeah.
Now, I can move it into a problem if I can invent something that guy can do. And I better figure out how do I alter the invention that guy number 2 is going to allow it to happen.
One of the things that you were known for is having fun at work.
No, me? Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to overwhelm your mic there.
In particular, we worked in a Midwest manufacturing, old guard, Rust Belt organization. There was a lot of structure. There was a lot of, this is the way we do it. We'll call it stodgy, maybe. What are some stories that you can share having fun at work?
Goodness gracious, there are so many, because I did have a lot of fun, both humorous and fun because I got to do things that I wanted to do.
Sure.
On the humorous side, we were challenged with a particularly difficult problem, and there was a very early team building opportunity. Within the first minute, I realized it was so quiet, and nobody was talking. We were supposed to have a team. So the first thing I did was I wrote a Dr. Seuss poem that dealt with the dilemma that we had. And I had my wife create the characters, and we made it into a big yellow book that probably was 3 feet high and 2 feet wide, and brought it in and set it on the table. Now, if you get some attention from that, you got a Dr. Seuss thing. And I believe the phrase that caught everyone's attention was, the bloke with the smoke started to choke on the gas that was passed from the previous stroke. And so I was like, oh, they're leaning here. And so it was clever.
Yeah.
Then I did this has got to be the craziest thing I ever did. I decided this entire squadron, we were going to build a quilt.
Okay.
So when you announce something like that, you are definitely looked at as, oh my Lord. So I went to each one of them. I want you to think about our challenge, and I want you to build
your patch.
Thank you. I was looking, yeah, that was intentional, by the way. The patch. And so it didn't happen.
Okay.
They're just like, oh, this guy's crazy.
He can't be serious.
Yeah, I can't be serious. I would remind them on a daily basis that we really need the patches. The young lady that had started probably just within the last 2 months, she stepped right up and she made one. Great. I got one. And so the older curmudgeon guys, they did it. Finally, it started drifting, and there was like one left, and it was like pulling teeth, got it out of them. And they all were different, and they all had a different view. Some were cynical, some were very positive. Like, okay. So I took them home, and my wife sewed them into this wonderful quilt. I took it in and I hung it up.
Yeah.
And I said, there's the quilt. I'm going to dial forward here pretty quickly. Here's a quilt sitting next to a book that's a Dr. Seuss book. Okay. And you're going like, okay. And then because I needed to be more innovative, I created the innovation belt. And on the belt were all of these pins that I had made at home on my homemaker. It was an exclamation point that meant this is exciting or whatever it is. And I had all these pins on there. And you get one if you have some ideas, if we start talking. Dial forward and say, well, did it do any good? When we had the open house, because everything worked, there was a line of guys showing their kids and their wives and everything else, the quilt and the book.
Wow.
And you're going like, okay, so maybe I wasn't so nuts.
Right.
Not exactly sure I wasn't, but there was tense moments, shall we say, when you're dealing with engineers who look at you like, you had to be kidding me.
There's a story that I think I remember. It might be folklore, so you'll have to clarify if it is or isn't.
Sure.
We were in the same division, and I remember there being an edict that was passed out that all presentations had to be a one-sheeter.
Really?
There was this format. It was a design review format, and everybody had to show up in the exact same format and use the one-sheeter. And I wasn't in the meeting, but I heard a rumor that you came to that meeting and had something like 20 animations that showed up. So essentially you just took a 20-slide presentation and made it a one-sheeter by animating all of the information on top of it. Can you confirm or deny?
I can.
Okay.
It sounds exactly like me.
That's right.
So I can understand why somebody would say, your irreverence we're showing again, but I do not remember anything like
Okay.
Okay. So I said yes to the first one, but this one, the answer is no. I did not. There's no time in my life that I ever used one sheet.
That's right.
No.
That's right.
Doing it. And yes, I could have pulled that little stunt off.
Oh, I'm certain any good urban legend is good enough to be true.
So there might have been some element of truth where before they actually edicted it, that I pulled this stunt to show them. That is possible, by the way.
Okay.
Let's call it maybe.
Maybe. I met you when I started at Caterpillar right around 2004. 2004 is when you were nominated for and awarded the United States Inventor of the Year. I have no questions about that whatsoever. That's
Good.
Not the reason that I invited you here. I just wanted to mention it because I knew you would scowl just a little bit at the thought of it. But there is one story that I remember you telling from that event. So you went out to Washington, D.C. I think the president.
It was not the president, but there were congressmen involved in this whole process. Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember you telling me the story that you ended up connecting and actually spending most of the evening talking with the photographer.
I did. That is true.
You said he was probably the most interesting guy in the entire room.
Well, I got to be careful here because I think most people have a certain cynical, and I was probably more cynical after I had been there. You're in this massive hall in the Canon office building. It's a beautiful place, and there's shrimp and there's drinks. I don't drink, so that isn't going to do me any good. I'm going to give a talk here, so I'm not going to eat any shrimp or anything like that. There's hundreds of people in there. Nobody knows me. They were just office workers that came over going, there's free shrimp, there's free drinks over in this particular place over there. Prior to that, I had to give a speech at the press club. Mm-hmm. The photographer was back there. So before it all started, so I started talking to the guy. And we got into knowing real well. And I said, well, you're going to make me look real good. He said, yeah, I'll make you really good. And then he says, well, I'll see you over at that one. They put a nice spread out over there. Really? Really? To me, it's how you really find out how it's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And so here's a guy that's doing it all the time. And you're going, the taxpayers are paying for this and they're all this stuff. And everybody's backslapping and doing whatever they need to do. It was informative, shall we say.
But I think it points to, when we talked about inspiring people, it points to your leadership style. It points to your personality style, which is to say, you could be in a room full of congressmen and you're not going to give all of your attention to the highest ranking person in the room. You've always sought to interact with everyone in the room.
I think that everybody has to connect to everybody. Mm-hmm. I once said it's always good to have the vice president of your organization in the room, not because that he's going to anoint you with something. You need to know what's going on. You need to know as much information so that when you go back to that, how do you turn a paradox into a problem? You start to build your quiver of understanding how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah. A phrase that I remember you using multiple times is that you would focus on talking to every person in the room.
Absolutely.
And once you have talked to every person in the room, because most people don't communicate very well with each other, you can actually become the most informed person in the room.
You hit upon one thing. I said, I always want to be the smartest guy in the room. And I've said, if I know what I know and I know what you know, it makes me the smartest guy in the room. Now, some people might look at that and like, well, that doesn't sound very collaborative or whatever.
Sure.
But it is. It's absolutely important that at some point in time, somebody knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that somebody needs to be really knowledgeable of all the deets, all the details, all the info, and then being able to maneuver and make that system, whether you like it the way it is, whether you don't like it the way it is, whether that guy's going to yell at you, whether that guy's not going to yell at the end of the day, how do I get out of this? How do you get out of Dodge?
Right.
That was one of my comment phrases. Well, how the heck are we going to get out of Dodge this time? What? We've got this 4-wheel drive stuck places that the 2-wheel couldn't even get to.
Right.
Many times. Many times.
Another phrase that you've used before and I've really appreciated is bosses are appointed, leaders are followed. Talk to me about that phrase.
That is more useful than maybe even you imagine. We talked about people that I admired and stuff like that. We had a lady who cleaned our office.
Mm-hmm.
And if she said we had to clean this or we had to do that, it was like, I'm doing what she said. That's hard to imagine.
Mm.
There was nobody in the world that would imagine that this person is anyway going to lead something. It's something as simple as if that restroom doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to be, that isn't good for anybody, including me. And you seem to know what's going on here. Mm. I always admired that person. I like people to know what they're doing, and I'm going to follow them.
What would a way that a person who desires to become a better leader, but they're not yet in a manager position, what would be a way that somebody in that situation could grow in leadership or in inspiring others?
You probably asked the hardest question for me, that particular one, because I know a way, and that a way is not one that anybody wants to hear, and that's becoming so competent at all technical aspects so that you can invent and create. Because I'm a believer that the systems and the devices that we create have the overwhelming impact on what we do, how we do it, and what organization gets formed around. And so if you develop your skills to that level, but you have empathy, so you're an inventor and an empath, you're unstoppable.
That's great. You talk also about avoiding becoming a bitter old engineer.
Oh boy, the bitter old engineer.
The bitter old engineer. First question is it something that you were ever tempted to?
No, not at all. In fact, I always made the comment, and this is a true comment that I made to myself. It's fun being Jim. It's not easy being Jim.
Sure.
You laugh because you know what that means.
That's right.
You know exactly what that means. And it's hard to explain all the details. Yeah, the bitter old engineer, it's so hard to reverse it.
Yes.
It's so hard because the person is so damaged.
Yeah.
The cynicism is so deep that no matter what you say, they're going to be looking at you highly suspicious. If you come in with your big smile and going, hey, how's it going? What are you going to do? It ain't going to play.
Right.
I've heard that before. I've seen this before. I've been promised things before. Go through the whole thing. And all of these people before that didn't do what they should have done has really caused a huge problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's contagious also, right? It passes from one generation to the next. There are bitter young engineers who act like bitter old engineers.
That is true. I spent time trying to avoid some of them. Some of them, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do. I always believed that I could reclaim everybody. And for some reason along the line, they kept sending people that were damaged over to me. I'm not sure how that happened, really. This was early on. And I came to believe that I could reclaim anybody. I came to believe I couldn't after some of them. Most of them I could. It was like, oh man, I'm hot stuff. Wow, I'm really good. I can motivate people. I can get them excited about it. I can reposition them. There are some that are far, far gone beyond that. And there is nothing that I could do.
What were some of the moves that you used to help reclaim those that maybe hadn't gone over the 6?
Absolutely find out what it is they can do. What are you good at? Not, can you do this job? So the first thing you do is you find out, what does the guy get excited about? And you talk to him and you find out, oh, the guy, you're really good at this, at Excel, or you're really good at this. And you sit there at the same time in the back of your mind, you're thinking, what does the company not do that this guy could do?
Yeah.
And from that moment on, if he's redeemable, you're off and running.
Yeah.
You've got it. You may have to position that person in another place just because you don't do that or they don't do that right there, but 2 blocks over they do it. But in the back of your mind, day and night, you're thinking, what does this person do really well? And how would it fit within this huge company?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it works most of the time.
Sure.
The bitter old engineer is saved. We've saved the day. When they hire you as a leader, it is your responsibility, I believe, not to let the person just like, well, we let him go or he's going to sink or swim. I am not a sink or swimmer. It's my responsibility as a leader to make sure that that person does not fail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might at the end of the day say, well, there's nothing you could have done. Doesn't mean I don't feel bad about it.
Right.
Doesn't mean that I didn't sleep half the night trying to figure out what could I have done. Was he a lost cause that was beyond anything that we could have done?
Right.
I had a couple of those.
Yeah.
And I thought I could save him. Didn't happen. Was it painful? Absolutely.
Yeah. In leadership, as I've coached other people, even in my own career, you are rooting for that person's
Absolutely.
reclamation to the very last minute.
Breath. My last breath.
To the very last minute.
Yeah.
And there are times where every grace has been extended, every opportunity has been extended, and truly the right thing and the best thing for that individual is that they reboot somewhere else. But as a leader, I never went into a situation saying, how do we get this to be over? It was, how do we get out of this situation in a way that the employee is excited to be here, is contributing to the customer, and just rooting for success. To your point, it does make it that much harder as a leader when it goes the wrong way, because it's something you've been rooting for and you've been trying for.
It's not something that they teach you in college. It's not something that you can read in a book. You have to look people in the eye. You have to feel the pain that they're going through. One of the challenges is that there's always a private side to their lives.
Yes. That
may be really the thing that somebody hurt them really badly.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting there talking about, hey, we really need to be able to get a guy. That ain't going to fly, man.
Right. So if we talk about an ounce of prevention, maybe helping against a pound of cure, what advice would you give to a person who's early to mid-career that maybe has a propensity, if they don't intervene soon, are going to head towards possibly the cynicism of the bitter old engineer?
Okay, so I'm going to say they need to come and talk to you, Justin. I played another role which I never saw coming in, but it fits what you just called it. I call it the department psychiatrist.
Sure.
You immediately knew exactly what I'm talking about. It's a person that has reached a level of, hey, this guy's a really nice guy. He's not out for revenge. He's not out for anything. I'm not even sure he knows the party line or the org chart. There are org charts.
I've heard.
I've never seen one myself. I happened to play that part. Now, I'm not sure I volunteered. It just happened.
Sure.
The problem is there's recidivism. I love that word too. They actually, a lot of them were transformed when they had to face themselves and face what was going on and why these things were happening, knowing full well that whatever I told them wasn't going outside that conversation.
Right.
Hey, whatever I can do to help you here. What's going on? What's it? And you get into some things you don't really want to hear. So the next thing you know, lines starting to form out your door. And you go like, oh boy. Then my boss started sending them my way. After a while, you start scratching your head. That was where the concept of tell me who you like, because these qualities are something that you want to be. It wasn't anything that I needed to know. It was what they needed to know. And so that was just one component, because you have to have some mechanism to break down whatever this, because there are people that really give that blank look on their face. Like,
or they manifest the story in a way that it's so tightly wound that when you hear it, it is presented as a paradox.
Oh, yeah.
Like people will present their situation as a paradox, even there saying, okay, let's maybe tackle it from another direction. Maybe not head on, let's tackle it from another direction so that we can talk about what may be a proxy to this situation without having to talk directly into it.
I'll go back to my original. They need to come and talk to you. Go to Justin. That would be Justin at whatever you're at.
Grody.io.
Yeah, Grody.io.
The other thing that I have unfortunately had to experience, and this is advice that I give to people. I don't know if it's advice. Maybe is a principle advice. I don't know.
I'm sorry. I laughed like it is good.
It's unfortunate, but it's true. When we move from one place to another in our life, we pack our own bags and we pack our own stuff in our bags. And here's the example I'll use. I'm working with a young guy a number of years ago. He had these issues with the organization. The organization does this, and the organization does this, and the organization does this. I made the personal observation for myself. So I said, I've been in multiple places, different companies, different churches, different organizations. There's sometimes where I find that, man, this smells the same as the last place. As you get to be my age, as you get to 2 or 3 stops on the train tracks and you get out and you smell the train station, when they all start to smell the same, the question that can be asked logically is it in my luggage?
Yeah.
Am I carrying this with me to every station? And there have been multiple people that when presented with that construct have then started to say, now that you mention it, the last company I worked at was like this too. And when I was an intern at this other company, they treated me like this too. It is to say, I think there are some that have a predisposition to certain wavelengths in an organization. And sometimes the best you can do is highlight, you're going to find that wavelength everywhere. You have to either pull the antenna down or find a way not to receive that wavelength at the amplitude that you currently are.
It actually is an excellent comment, because is it you? That's what you really said. Is it me?
Right.
Is it me that in this? We all have to ask ourselves, if something's aren't going right, is it me?
Right. And to what extent?
Yeah.
That's right.
And at that point in time, that soul searching, not easy to do, by the way, soul searching.
No.
Because it's so much easier to point at somebody else. But most of us know that it's how we react to all of this.
You mentioned leadership concepts, and there's a couple concepts that you wrote, and I really appreciated how they were written. An important role of a leader is to learn how to be honest but not hurtful.
I think I've observed this. I personally did not have too much of that in my life because, once again, I told you, Murray Cook and Nelson Jones are 2 of the great bosses in the history of the world. They were more like, what can I do for you, Jim? I'm like, I'm going with you. They were terrific. I didn't quite have that kind of experience, but I watched, and I think it works pretty well if you're the department psychiatrist. You can be helpful without being hurtful. Mm. The boss, you're going to always be suspicious. Mm-hmm. So if you can get that honest dialogue going and that honest type of report back, that is pretty valuable. Mm-hmm. If the department psychiatrist is good at what they do, they'll be able to allow you to see it for yourself. Mm-hmm. They don't have to explain it.
They just lead you to the mirror.
That's exactly right.
As we come towards the end of the conversation, you are the author of one of the greatest retirement emails that has ever been written.
I'm blushing.
How about you share the story of your retirement email with the Grody UnProfessional audience? I
personally do not remember all of the details of it. I remember that consistent with my first coming into the company, my very first principle was I wanted to be the funniest guy at the company. Literally, this is true. After the first week, I realized I needed a new goals because this was not a funny company. But I found as I wandered my way through this that people reacted to this kind of strange sense of humor to the point that it insulated me a little bit and also intimidated some of the people that you've had a lovely, lovely opportunity to experience. So on my exit, I decided that I would have fun.
Yes.
I mean, I had fun in what I did, and fun was many things besides just humor. So I decided to be a little humorous and poke at the silliness that goes on when people retire from a company. Poke the bubble. And it basically starts out like a form that they had created, and it says, name goes here, and then in parentheses says, pump this sparrow into an eagle. I put my name there, and it goes on down and says, after 37 years, 35 on the tracks and 2 off the tracks, that type of thing, where I poked a little fun at the prestige aspect of this thing. I did end the whole thing with another paragraph that said, I really want to thank everybody. It floated throughout the organization to the secretaries that were supposed to release this. And the head of our entire business unit got a call back and says, I can't put this out. And he said, yes, you can. And so it flew. Not too long after it happened. By the way, I announced my leaving at noon and I was out of there by 3. I got this email. The last email I got pops up on my thing. Guy, I didn't recognize his name. It says, I don't know who you are, but you're my hero. That closed out my career. So I had somebody out there that thought I was a hero. It's like, how could you end better than that?
I don't remember it word for word, but I think it was something of like, after 33 great years, 2 mediocre years, and a few horrible years, Jim Weber has decided to spend more time with his family or something like that.
So it was not untasteful, but they let it fly.
It was completely on brand, is what I would say.
Definitely. It was definitely on brand. And to think that I wound out as a hero, isn't that incredible?
Absolutely. That sparrow was completely pumped into an eagle.
You betcha. You betcha. I went in to be the funniest guy, and I went out being a hero. My goodness gracious.
That's right. That's right.
Life can't be better than that.
Jim, it's so good to spend time with you. As I said, it's been a while since we've gotten to catch up. You inspired me more than you know in my career. It's an honor to get to sit across the table from you and talk about not just that organization, but the approach to how to be creative, how to be innovative, how to inspire other people. I'm so humbled for you to accept my invitation, and the cash has already been transferred in. You've gotten the cash?
Yeah. In fact, I do have this check here that you might want to sign.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. At the end, because I want your...
The autograph. That's what it was. You wanted my autograph, but on the bottom of the check.
Uh-huh.
That's where it is.
Uh-huh.
That makes sense.
Of course. Of course I did. You've known me long.
I've known you long
Way
enough.
too clever.
That's right.
Way too clever. I want to reverse it because I always control the situation.
Okay.
So I get to do the ending on this one and saying, I am so sorry that you had to face some of the things that I didn't have to face. It's just extraordinary what they did to you. But you got redemption. To the point where you really have to credit them for being the remarkable individual that you turned out to be.
That's right.
Because if you wouldn't have, you probably would have been some bitter old engineer sitting there reading that last thing that I wrote and going like, you're my hero.
Every journey you take, you don't get to pick all the aspects of it, but you do get to pick how you respond.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. That's been my journey.
You're my hero.
On that note, thanks for stopping by, Jim.
You bet.
For those that wish to share praise, feedback, accolades, or large sums of money, you can reach me at justin@grody.io. For those listening that lead global centers of excellence, if you don't mind, when you finish pumping that pigeon up to look like an eagle, could I borrow your air pump? I have a slow leak in the passenger front tire. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.